Good evening. I'm Mary Hunter-Utt, co-president of the League of Women Voters of the Cape Cod area, and I'd like to welcome you. Welcome to tonight's Candidates Forums. Before we get underway, we're very pleased to begin with a welcome from President Cox of the Cape Cod Community College. President Cox.
Good evening. And on behalf of our students, our faculty, our staff, and our trustees, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's Candidates Forum for both Sheriff and District Attorney. We appreciate the opportunity to host the League of Women Voters of the Cape Cod area and their partners, the Cape Media Center, the Cape Cod Times, and the Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition. We're very proud to welcome you this evening for this important conversation that will no doubt shape the future of our community. A healthy democracy requires healthy debate and conversation. In the courses that take place here on our campus, these conversations create well-rounded thinkers who stay and engage in our community as our voters and as our future leaders. As the Center for Higher Education for the Cape and Islands, we play a significant role in shaping the future of our region, and that includes playing a role in forums like this evening. To our candidates this evening, Donna Buckley and Tim Whalen, and Rob Gallegos, and Don Higgins, thank you for stepping up and getting involved and for staying involved and sharing your vision with us. And thank you everyone for being here this evening, and welcome to Cape Cod Community College.
Thank you, Dr. Cox. Hi, I'm Rosemary Shields. I'm the co-chair of the Voter Service Committee of the League of Women Voters. This is a hybrid event, live here in the auditorium and online in a Zoom webinar. I have an announcement to make for our Spanish-speaking participants on Zoom. I also want to thank Jeb Mize and Carmen Coqui Negron for interpreting. So, bienvenido a nuestro foro de candidatos para Sheriff de Condado de Barnstable. Para acceder al idioma español, haga clic en el globo en la parte baja de la pantalla y elija su idioma. En su celular, haga clic en los tres puntitos para encontrar el globo. Gracias, y gracias a Jeb Mays and Coqui Negron por todo su apoyo y ayuda. And now, I'm going to turn the program back to Mary.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you, all of you. We welcome you all at 4Cs and via Zoom to tonight's Candidates Forum for Barnstable County Sheriff. We want to thank our co-sponsors, the Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition, MAWOC, represented tonight by Deborah Dagwan, and the Cape Cod Times, represented tonight by Rachel Devaney. We also we thank them for helping to organize tonight's program and prepare questions for the candidates. Cape Media Center also provided important technical support and are streaming this program to channels 98 and 99. We especially want to thank the Cape Cod Community College for hosting us live at the Tilden Arts Center. This forum is part of the League's ongoing voter education work to help voters make informed decisions for the November 8 election. We hope that over the course of this program, you will learn more about the candidates and what they hope to do if elected to represent us as Barnstable County Sheriff. I will now turn the forum over to our moderator, Dr. Kathleen Leslie of the League of Women Voters of the Plymouth area. Dr. Leslie?
Thank you, Mary. In turn, I would like to introduce our candidates for Barnstable County Sheriff. They are Democrat Donna Buckley and Republican State Representative Timothy Whalen. We thank the both of you for showing commitment to our community by running for public office and for participating in this forum. I will start the program by explaining the procedures for the forum, which each candidate received ahead of time. You will have 2 questions for an opening statement, 2 minutes for a closing statement, and 2 minutes to answer each question. Opening and closing statements were determined by lot just prior to the program this evening. Timothy Whalen will start with his opening statement, followed by Donna Buckley. Closing statements will be first by Donna Buckley, second by Timothy Whalen. The timekeepers are sitting in the first row. When there is a half-minute left on your speaking time, the timekeeper will hold up the yellow card that says 30 seconds, indicating that you have 30 seconds to finish your answer. Please wrap up by finishing your sentence when you see the stop sign come up. If you continue speaking beyond a sentence after the stop sign, I will say thank you and move on to the next speaker. Personal references about other candidates are out of order. We are speaking to the issues. Not only is this meeting live in the main auditorium of the Tilden Arts Center on the campus of Cape Cod Community College, this forum is also on Zoom and is being broadcast live by Cape Media on Channel 98 and Channel 99 and will be rebroadcast several times before the November 8th election. Now, instructions for the audience. Please turn off your cell phones and your watches. We request you treat all candidates fairly, remain quiet throughout the forum, no clapping, no cheering. After closing statements, you may clap for both candidates. No campaign literature or signs are allowed inside the room. You are encouraged to submit questions for the candidates on the provided index cards. Questions must be addressed to both candidates and must apply to issues or qualifications for their particular office. Raise your hand if you'd like an index card or to have your question collected. A league panel will review the questions for legibility, clarity, and applicability to all candidates. I will read as many questions as time allows. And Rosemary, you already explained the Spanish-speaking Zoom?
And I will do it again.
Okay, and you're going to do it again? All right.
Just in case. Bienvenido a nuestro foro de candidatos para sheriff de condado de Barnstable. Para acceder al idioma español, haga clic en el globo en la parte baja de la pantalla y elija su idioma. En su celular, haga clic en los 3 puntitos para encontrar el globo. Gracias. And a reminder to the candidates, please speak clearly and take lots of breaths. It will help the interpreters to translate your words to best reflect your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. We are now ready for opening statements. You have 2 minutes for your opening statements, and we will start with Timothy Whalen.
Thank you. My name is Tim Whalen, and I humbly ask for your vote to serve as your next Barnstable County Sheriff. It has been the honor of a lifetime to serve these past 8 years as the state representative from the 1st Barnstable District, which has been the latest iteration of my lifetime of public service, which began at the age of 19 years old when I began my public safety journey, serving as a corrections officer with the Worcester County Sheriff's Office. I am a graduate of the Massachusetts Department of Correction Training Academy, where I was recognized with the Commissioner's Award for highest academic performance in my academy class. I was promoted to the rank of lieutenant and shift commander and have worked in maximum, medium, minimum, and work release security levels. I have served our Commonwealth for 21 years as a Massachusetts State Trooper, assigned as a shift commander to both the Bourne and South Yarmouth barracks, with our service area covering the entirety of Cape Cod and beyond. And I am a very proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps. But more important than that, I am a husband of 32 years to my wife, Lisa, father to our 2 excellent daughters, Katie and Maggie, and I am entirely invested in our beautiful Cape Cod community. I have spent my life in service and am dedicated to my very core to keeping you, your families, and our communities safe. Cape Cod is a special place, unlike anywhere else I've seen in our Commonwealth. This year, our longtime sheriff, my friend Jim Cummings, wraps up his 50 years of public service, and the office of Barnstable County Sheriff is an open seat with 2 good candidates for you, the voter, to choose from. I present myself to you as the candidate in this race who has served on the front lines in law enforcement and public policy. I've worn a badge in your service for decades, and I've established myself as a legislative leader on Beacon Hill these past 8 years. I have the skills and qualifications to succeed Sheriff Cummings on day one, and I ask for your support and for your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Whalen. Donna Buckley, your opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Donna Buckley, and I am running to be your next Barnstable County Sheriff. Did you know, just last week, we learned that 90% of Americans agree on something. What they agree on is that we are in the midst of a mental health crisis. 70% of Americans agree that the opioid epidemic is a crisis. We see evidence of this every day. We all in this auditorium and watching us from home are touched in some way by these devastating diseases. In our jails today, 60 to 80% of inmates suffer from addiction and/or mental health issues. Why do I give you those statistics? Because our jails are at the epicenter of mental health and addiction crises. The important part of this election for sheriff is understanding the role of the sheriff and understanding the role the sheriff plays in addressing these crises. The role of the sheriff is different from state to state. It's not a stereotype of a guy with a badge and a gun on a horse with a cigar and wearing boots. In Massachusetts, the sheriff runs our jails. The sheriff also runs a complex organization. The sheriff employs 300 people, has a $30+ million budget, and its core mission is correction, rehabilitation, and treatment of inmates. The sheriff is responsible for providing a safe workplace for the staff, ensuring a safe environment for the inmates, and making sure that when inmates are released, they don't commit more crimes and they don't come back.
Thank you, Ms. Buckley. We now begin the question and answer portion of the forum. Candidates, during the course of the discussion, please feel free to have a question repeated. I will turn the first 2 questions over to Rachel Devaney of the Cape Cod Times. And Mr. Donna Buckley, you get the first question. First question first.
The first question is, the Massachusetts Departments of Corrections and the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office are the only 2 agencies in Massachusetts that have the 287G jail enforcement agreements with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. This agreement allows the sheriff to contact ICE if an inmate is found to be wanted by the agency. If elected, do you plan to continue with the agreement, and if so, why? What are the costs? What are the benefits?
Thank you. When I am elected sheriff of Barnstable County, one of the first things that I will do is reject the agreement between the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. It is not reflective of the role of the sheriff. The role of the sheriff is correction, rehabilitation, and treatment of inmates. The agreement with ICE requires the sheriff to divert from that mission both personnel and economic resources in order to perform the civil function of ICE. What we have also seen here in Barnstable County is that our current sheriff's office has used that agreement to target immigrants. The sheriff does not decide when inmates are released from the jail, regardless of whether they are here lawfully or not. The courts make that decision. And when the courts determine that someone is eligible to be released, the sheriff's responsibility is to release them. The court may have determined that they are released because they were found innocent of the offense, that they posted bail, or that they had finished serving their time. That is the end of the role of the sheriff. Using our resources to perform the job of someone else is a theme that is diverting our attention from the mental health and addiction crises that we need to address.
Thank you, Donna. Mr. Whalen, would you like the question repeated?
No, thank you. Yes, I support the agreement. Like Sheriff Cummings, I believe that the 287G program the Sheriff's Office has with Immigration and Customs Enforcement is a valuable tool that keeps Cape Codders safe. Between us, Sheriff Cummings and I share over 3/4 of a century of frontline law enforcement experience, and the lessons we have learned in that time about how to keep our community safe is important. The very minimal amount of time that it takes for a department member to enter a new arrival's name into a computer and run it like a simple warrant check has been inflated over and over by those who oppose this program. It involves little more than one extra computer warrant check, like is done on every person upon being sent by the court. And these folks have been sent to us by the court after a determination of probable cause or guilt beyond a reasonable doubt has been established. So this is not in violation of the Commonwealth versus Lund decision of 2017. There is no constitutional crisis whatsoever, and this program keeps us safe by removing dangerous persons from our community who have no legal status in the first place. Let's just look at the charges on the 3 people referred to ICE in just the month of August of this year. Kidnapping and disorderly conduct. Number 2, operating under the influence, 4th or greater offense. Number 3, strangulation, suffocation, cruelty to an animal, assault and battery, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, assault and battery on a police officer, assault and battery on a family household member ×2, and assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. This is just 1 month. 1 month. I could go on for hours, but the stories remain the same, frightening and dangerous. With my decades of serving directly on public safety's front lines, I fail to see how we improve public safety by sending people with these violent and dangerous charges back to Main Street, Cape Cod, when they have no legal authority to be here in the first place. Thank you.
Second question, Ms. Devaney.
Thank you. There has long been inequity between number and level of services aimed at rehabilitation that are available to male inmates compared to the number of services available to female inmates. This leaves women with the unenviable choice of remaining in Barnstable County Jail to be near their family or going to an off-Cape corrections facility to gain access to a high level of rehabilitative services. Sheriff Cummings has said in the past that budget constraints prevent him from offering the same level of services to all inmates, regardless of gender. Do you have a plan to address this inequity? If so, what is that plan?
Timothy Whalen, you go first.
Sure, and thank you very much for that question. So one of the first things that I would do if I am blessed with the endorsement of the voters to be your next Barnstable County Sheriff is I will immediately assemble a transition team to review all practices and the provision of services within the Sheriff's Department to include programming for mental health, substance use disorder, and an eye toward improving outcomes for incarcerated persons upon their release, both male and female. The Sheriff's Office right now is widely recognized as a national leader in this area, but there will always be room for improvement in ways that we can do a better job. Here are some of my goals. I want to establish an almost home program to involve families with their loved ones pre-release and with follow-on connections post-release. Reunification can be a difficult time for families, and we all know that when things are broken at home, it's hard to be right anywhere else. I am already talking with local vocational leaders to try and identify a series of job training programs appropriate to the limited sentences of the population and to the needs within our local job market. Ronald Reagan was right when he said that the greatest social program in the history of the world is a job. And that special sense of dignity that you get from supporting yourself and your family through your own labors is a very critical part of that recovery. I will absolutely, on day one, reinstate the Regional Substance Abuse Treatment Program for incarcerated women. I will also institute a series of Corey-friendly job fairs to connect local employers with incarcerated job seekers. This has been successful in Plymouth and Worcester counties. Why not here? At the end of the day, COVID has really turned programming upside down. In-person therapy and treatment disappeared in favor of remote therapy, which is less effective. I will prioritize reinstating every pre-COVID service to an in-person model to increase its effectiveness and improve outcomes, both male and female, equally. Thank you.
Donna Buckley, would you like that question repeated?
Yes, please.
There has long been inequity between number and level of services aimed at rehabilitation that are available to male inmates compared to the number of services available to female inmates. This leaves women with the unenviable choice of remaining in Barnstable County Jail to be near their family or going to an off-Cape corrections facility to gain access to a high level of rehabilitative services. Sheriff Cummings has said in the past that budget constraints prevent him from offering the same level of services to all inmates regardless of gender. Do you have a plan to address this inequity? If so, what is that plan?
Thank you for the question. During the last 4 years, I had the opportunity to work in our jail every single day. I worked there as general counsel, and what I saw was not a lack of resources to provide female inmates with the tools that they need to succeed. What I saw was a diversion from the core mission of our sheriff's office, which created a devastating impact on females who are incarcerated at the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office. It is not enough just to restore access to the RSAT program. Fundamentally, women deserve conditions of confinement that relate to the unique traumas that they face. Women deserve the same opportunities to earn good time so that they do not end up serving longer sentences than men who are sentenced for the same crimes. What does that actually look like? Men can work in the kitchen, women cannot. Men can clean the jail, women cannot. Men used to be able to go out on community work crews, women could not. Men used to be able to do community service projects, women could not. All of those things created circumstances where men got time off of their sentences and women stayed in jail. That devastating impact is not only felt by the women incarcerated, but by us in our community, because they were unprepared to be released, which impacted their families, their children, our communities, our tax dollars, and created circumstances where they were more likely to reoffend or find themselves in vulnerable situations where they were unable to begin to rebuild their lives. So my plan, with the resources that we have, and taking them away from the things that divert us from our mission, like the boat, will help us ensure that women get equal treatment.
Thank you, Donna Buckley. The next two questions will be asked by Deborah Dagwan of the Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition. Donna Buckley will answer the question first. Ms. Dagwan?
Good evening. As Sheriff, what are your plans to ensure diversity and inclusion are guiding principles in your recruitment of employees of color at all levels, and for providing diversity and inclusion in-service training for all staff to help ensure equal access to reentry programs, mental health, addiction treatment, and the prevention of discriminatory outcomes of inmate disciplinary actions?
Thank you for the question. Again, during my last 4 years at the Sheriff's Office, I had the ability to see what we had in place and what we needed to move toward. And one of the things that was frustrating for me was that I was unable to accomplish or convince the administration that we needed to bring in modern-day training. We need to make sure that all of our staff receive diversity, equity, and inclusion training. We need to make sure our staff receive bias training. We need to make sure our staff receive sexual harassment training, and the training that they need to do the job that we ask them to do. In my 37 years representing public employees, the main value that I have taken with me is that we should never ask employees to do a job without giving them the tools and resources that they need, and that includes training. We also need to make sure that our jail is faceless, that everyone who comes into our jail, whether as an employee or an inmate, receives the same opportunities and is eligible for the same outcomes. The only deciding factor in how someone experiences their work at the jail or their confinement is what they are willing to put into it. Thank you.
Timothy Whalen?
I would just like to clarify, if I could please, Deb, the question is related to hiring as well as the programming and the outcomes for the incarcerated population, both, is that correct?
Yeah, treatment and equity and treatment and employment.
Equity, treatment, and employment. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. So during my time in the legislature, I've served on the Special Legislative Commission on Equitable Hiring as it relates to civil service departments, non-civil service departments, and the state police. And we came up with a series of just really broad ideas on how we could improve equitable hiring and giving better job opportunities to make sure that the workforce looks exactly like, or as close as we can get it to, the community that it serves. Some of the ideas that we came up with, which the state police just started, which they modeled after the Boston police example, which has been very successful, is a cadet program. Now, the beauty of a cadet program is it contributes as well to recruitment. And recruitment obviously is a very, very big part of this. We know that the Sheriff's Office right now is suffering from a serious issue with recruitment, and staffing levels right now are suffering because of that. So I view the establishment of a cadet program, reaching out to our communities, to Barnstable, to Falmouth, the communities of color, and to trying to give people an opportunity to enter into a cadet program where they can be employed, they can do 2 or 3 years serving with the department, and then that puts them in a position that they can go through the Corrections Academy or assume another position within the department. I believe that that's something that we absolutely should be moving into the direction of. I'm also a big fan of, and I fully supported legislatively, the implicit bias training that we began for all law enforcement officers across the Commonwealth. I also served on the conference committee that delivered peace officer standards and training and the police reform package. And we included in that series as well of implicit bias training. Now, as it results with the incarcerated population, we will absolutely, positively, under my leadership, make sure that our approach to offering programming to the incarcerated population is equitable and provides the best results for everybody, no matter what they look like, no matter who they are. Everybody is going to get the same opportunity because we owe that to them. Thank you.
And we have a second question from
Yes,
the Massachusetts Coalition.
thank you. Please, who's going to answer it first?
Mr. Whalen will be answering it first.
Thank you. Please share how you will implement policies and procedures to encourage minority vendors and contractors who have been underutilized to do business within the Sheriff's Department.
That's an excellent question, and I appreciate that, Deb. I believe that the Commonwealth will follow the Commonwealth model. The Commonwealth, particularly under the leadership of Governor Bacon and Lieutenant Governor Polito, has really made strides and improved our outreach to women-owned businesses, businesses owned by persons of color from the BIPOC communities, to make sure that they are aware of, they're notified of jobs that are available. They're also, I want to see if we can work through making sure that we get people certified under the state system so that they can apply for these positions. But yes, absolutely, that's something that will be a priority under my administration. Thank you.
Donna Buckley.
Thank you. Could you repeat the question?
This is on it real quick. Please share how you will implement policies and procedures to encourage minority vendors and contractors who have been underutilized to do business with the Sheriff Department.
Thank you. One of the visions that I have for our Sheriff's Office for the next 6 years is to make sure that it becomes a part of our Barnstable County community. And that includes involving our businesses and our nonprofits and the organizations that are waiting to come to our jail to help us do our work. One of the ways that I am certain that we will be able to increase outreach to minority businesses is to establish stakeholder meetings and roundtables so that we have people at the table who understand what we are looking to do at the jail, can help inform what resources are available, and then are able to bid or apply or suggest how we might be able to go about securing those services. And since our jail disproportionately contains members of minority communities, we need to make sure that the vendors that we have are able to provide services that are targeted to the unique needs of the people who are in our jail.
Thank you. We now move on to questions and answers from the audience. When people registered for this forum, we asked them to send questions in advance. Please note, I will alternate the order of who answers first. You have 2 minutes to answer each question. I will start with Donna Buckley. Thank you. How will you prepare to implement the provisions of the newly passed Votes Act, specifically the provisions that relate to jail-based voting for those who are eligible?
Thank you for that. I remember actually answering this question a while ago, so my answer is online. I believe that one of the most important services that we should be providing at our jail is access to voting. But access to voting isn't just making sure that someone has a ballot, or that we ask someone whether they want to vote, or that we ask them whether or not they are registered. It means making sure that we make available to them the choices that are on the ballot, so that people running for office have access to the inmates to explain their positions, such as this forum, and that inmates have the ability to gather information and be informed about what each candidate stands for before they vote.
Thank you, Donna. Mr. Whalen, would you like the question repeated?
No, thank you very much. I recall we debated this just within the past year in the legislature with the Votes Act, and I supported the idea. I remember I was able to generate some support from colleagues of mine in the Republican caucus to make sure that we got some support behind us to improve access for those who are incarcerated to voting. And I promise you that if I am elected sheriff, if I'm blessed with your endorsement, I will guarantee that I will follow that law, every letter of the law, to make sure that the prisoners are getting access exactly as the law describes.
The second question from the audience will be answered first by Timothy Whalen. What is your position on upholding the Family and Work Mobility Act passed by the Massachusetts legislature this year? This act allows undocumented immigrants to obtain learner permits and to meet testing and insurance requirements in order to obtain a Mass driver's license.
I spoke against the Work and Family Mobility Act. I voted against the Work and Family Mobility Act, and I am going to explain to you the reasons why. When someone, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I said when I spoke to my colleagues in the House, when someone presents themselves at the registry, they are given a list of documents that are to be accepted by someone at the registry that will prove their identification. Very often, those documents are in a foreign language. My family came from County Cork, Ireland. I have no idea what a valid birth certificate looks like from County Cork, Ireland. Under the current system that we had in place prior to the enactment of this law, a person would have to be here with legal status in order to drive. That meant that they would have to go through the consulate in their home country. In their home country, the documents that they provided would be made available and would be confirmed before they came here. Now what we have is a system whereby someone can forge documents, and we're relying on the clerk at the counter of the Registry of Motor Vehicles to confirm the validity of those documents. And when that document is issued and provides someone an identification, the gold standard of identification has always been a driver's license issued by a state. So what we are doing now, in essence, and what I am concerned with, is that we are going to have people who are going to be able to come to the United States and assume a new identity and leave their whatever issues they had in their home country behind. Thank you.
Donna Buckley, would you like the question repeated?
No, thank you. I do want to just be clear on the previous question. I want to make sure everyone understands that I am not proposing that we just follow the law. I am proposing that we go above and beyond the requirements of the law to make sure that inmates have access to information and the candidates, which is not something that's provided for in the law. But that is something that reflects the philosophy of our next sheriff. With regard to question 4 that's on the ballot, right now, the reality is we have people who are driving who do not have licenses. We are all going to suffer the consequences if there is an accident because they will leave, we will not be able to recover, they will have no insurance. Question 4 levels the playing field and gives people identification while they are operating a vehicle. They get insurance. If there is a motor vehicle accident, it's treated the same as if 2 parties were insured, and it creates a greater level of public safety for all of us. It does not automatically enroll ineligible people in the ability to vote, and it does not give them anything other than a document that says they can drive a car. So I support question 4, and I'm going to be voting yes on question 4.
Next question, to be answered first by Donna Buckley. Considering Barnstable County's higher than average recidivism rate, and considering that Barnstable County inmates are held for low-level crimes, what will you do to better equip and prepare inmates for return to family and community?
Are you sure we only get 2 minutes? In all honesty, that is not a question that can be justifiably answered in 2 minutes, but I will try. One of the challenges that we have right now is that we don't really keep good data. We do have a higher than average recidivism rate, but we don't have data to show what programs we're offering, what programs are working, and what we could be doing better. So one of the things that will help to cut down on recidivism is making sure that we use evidence-based, data-driven programs and policies when we are providing correction, rehabilitation, and treatment. The higher than average recidivism rate means that we, in Barnstable County, are not safe because people are being released from our jails without the tools and resources they need to begin to rebuild their lives, move on, get a job, pay taxes, and stay out of our jails. The core mission of our sheriff, the reason our sheriff's office exists, is to make sure that when people are released back into our community, they don't reoffend. That is how we cut down on recidivism. And what does that look like on the inside? It looks like offering programs, education, medication-assisted treatment, addiction counseling, special education services, job training, and on and on. It can be as simple as bringing AA meetings back into the jail so that inmates who are dealing with addiction issues can connect with those support groups they're going to need when they leave. It can be as simple as making sure that our community college is a partner with us, offering education programs that begin while people are incarcerated. I call it an individual correction plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Timothy Whalen?
Thank you. So I agree with a lot of what Attorney Buckley said about the programming. I agree with her that we need to step up our game. There are a couple of realities that we look at behind here. Again, and I had mentioned earlier that COVID turned a lot of programming, not just behind the wall, but out in our community. It turned it, flipped it on its ear. We went from having in-person therapy to having virtual therapy over a tablet, which is much, much less effective. When I've spoken to parents supporting parents and other community-based organizations who are dealing with the addiction crisis, that are dealing with substance use disorder in their own families, they advise me of this over and over and over. So a lot of this right now is driven by COVID. Statistically, a lot of it is also driven by a combination of COVID and the criminal justice reform law that we passed in 2018. As a result of that, we are seeing that the counts in the facilities has dropped significantly. The count right now, as Attorney Buckley will tell you as well, it floats somewhere in the area of around 170. It's usually around 60 or 70 sentenced inmates and 100, maybe a little bit more, who are pre-sentenced. But what we're finding is that based upon the sentencing of the courts under the criminal justice reform law guidelines, those prisoners who are coming inside tend to have much more of a violent history and violent ideations. So it's not so much the person who made a couple of mistakes as much as it is someone who has much, much deeper things going on that we need to work harder to help. And it begins with improving the programming that the Sheriff's Office already delivers in dealing with mental health concerns and substance use disorder, and for those who are dual diagnosis.
Next question is answered first by Timothy Whalen. There were recent reports of 3 inmate deaths at the House of Correction this summer. How do we get greater transparency concerning inmate deaths? What steps might you take to prevent such things from happening?
Thank you. I've responded to too many suicides in our community during my 26 years in law enforcement, and every single case is tragic and it hurts families. I've seen firsthand the agony and suffering the survivors and friends go through after their friend or family member made the wrong choice during a difficult time. Suicide, like mental health, is an undertreated epidemic in our Commonwealth at large, and it is not relegated only to our correctional facilities. And unfortunately, too many in our Commonwealth are only getting the mental health care they need when they become criminal justice involved. Currently on arrival at the Barnstable County Correctional Facility, every person is screened for a suicidal history and ideations. Based upon those results, they're placed on either direct observation, a 15-minute watch, and every resident there is checked at least every 30 minutes. I plan to review all existing policies from top to bottom, and I want to investigate best practices in other facilities across Massachusetts and beyond that includes involving the National Institute of Corrections and community groups like the Samaritans, Sharing Kindness, Duffy, and other local clinical services, with an eye toward updating and improving our operation. As an example, we need to look to cover and remove all tie-off points in the cells and the showers. Make sure that all the cameras in the observation cells are adequate to observe any acts of self-harm immediately. And we need to involve all staff in suicide prevention. Staff building communication and relationships with incarcerated people is crucial. I want to provide a daily trainer to the staff that will include suicide prevention ideas and training. Create a culture of suicide prevention within the facility and encourage reporting and communication on all levels. Thank you.
Donna Buckley.
Thank you. We must all understand that when we as a society take away someone's liberty, our sheriff has a sacred responsibility to make sure that they are safe. Tragedies happen. What is most disappointing about these tragedies is that we never heard about them from our sheriff. We heard about them from a newspaper report, well after they occurred. We need a sheriff's office that we can trust, to be honest with the taxpayers in Barnstable County. We need a sheriff's office that understands that it is accountable to the taxpayers. And we need a sheriff's office that we can trust that will take the steps necessary to make sure that these tragedies do not happen again. There are people sitting here tonight whose family members have been the victim of suicide in our jails. And we are following the same policies and procedures many years after those suicides occurred. That leaves us with a question of, what if? We need to review those policies. We should not be following policies just because they are there. They obviously didn't work. But what most importantly we need to do is we need to move away from using a private vendor to provide medical and mental health services. In this instance, these suicides occurred when a private vendor determined that they were not a suicide risk. Obviously, they were wrong. We cannot rely on a private vendor. We need the level of accountability and expertise that will only come when we are the employer of these employees.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question? So we will move on to closing statements. Those were chosen by lot, as were opening statements. Donna Buckley goes first.
Okay. I want to thank the League of Women Voters of Cape Cod, the Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition, Cape Media, the Cape Cod Times, and Cape Cod Community College for hosting this event. It has been a pleasure to talk about these issues here today. Our sheriff's office belongs to the voters in Barnstable County, and there is a clear choice in this election. This election will set the direction of our sheriff's office for the next 6 years. I hope that learning about my qualifications and my experience and my vision to bring a modern professional correctional office, sheriff's office, to Barnstable County will help you understand what the choices are. We need an experienced sheriff that we can trust to prioritize correction, rehabilitation, and treatment of inmates. We do not need our sheriff's office to be a police department, have a patrol division, or have a boat. We need a sheriff who understands the difference between the special skills required of correctional staff and public-facing law enforcement. And we need a sheriff who will commit to devoting the resources of our sheriff's department to making sure that we address mental and health and addiction crises and provide correction, rehabilitation, and treatment. These are not novel ideas. Across the state, most of the other sheriff's offices are working in this direction. We in Barnstable County have been lagging behind. I want to be the sheriff who does the work every day to make sure that we have the most productive, most effective, most safe sheriff's office so that the inmates are safe and that when they are released, they have the opportunity to pay their debt, be held accountable for their crime, but then move on and rebuild their lives so that the purpose of incarceration in the first place works. I hope that I have earned your vote over these last hour, and I hope that you will vote for me on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna Buckley. We'll clap at the end, please. And now, Timothy Whalen, your closing statement.
Thank you. I want to thank Donna Buckley, and I want to thank our host this evening, the League of Women Voters of Cape Cod area, the Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition, the Cape Cod Times, and the Cape Media Center for their work in putting together this important and informative debate. I want to thank every one of you here in this live audience for taking time out of your day to hear from Attorney Buckley and I about our plans and our vision for the future. And thanks also extend to you folks, you viewers watching this at home. Thank you for learning more about this important race. The beauty of electoral politics is this. The candidates present themselves, and this whole process becomes something akin to a job interview, with you, the voter, becoming the HR department and trusted with whom it is you select to be the best candidate for the position applied for. In this case, that position is to serve as your next Barnstable County Sheriff. And I present before you myself and make the argument that I am that most qualified applicant for this position. I have served on the front lines of law enforcement, and remember, the sheriff's position is a law enforcement position, and don't let anyone tell you different. And it has been for decades and centuries. Working hard, day in and day out, I have been to keep our community safe. I've operated these past 8 years at the public policy level on Beacon Hill, where I authored important legislation combating the opioid epidemic and combating the trafficking of fentanyl and carfentanil in our communities. I've worked hard every day to listen and to conduct myself with dignity and grace and to get the job done. Friends, I can assure you that no one will work harder for you as your next Barnstable County Sheriff than I will. I have the support and endorsement of virtually all of the professional public safety unions across Cape Cod and beyond, and now I ask for your endorsement and for your vote. Please vote Tim Whalen for Barnstable County Sheriff, and I thank you very much for your consideration and your time.
Thank you, Timothy Whalen. I am now turning the microphone over to Mary Ott, co-president of the League of Women Voters of the Cape Cod area. Mary?
I'd like to close this forum by thanking our candidates, Donna Buckley and Timothy Whalen, thank you very much, for deciding to run for, oh, is this better? Sorry. I'd like to thank our candidates for deciding to run for sheriff and for giving voters a choice. I'd also like to thank Dr. Kathleen Leslie for serving as moderator this evening. We want to remind voters that the deadline to register to vote is October 29th. Early voting is October 22nd to November 4th, but you should check with your town hall or your town's website. Whoops. For locations and schedules. And while you're at it, check out a sample ballot. Election Day is November 8th. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Applications for mail-in voting must be received by the town clerk's office by 5 p.m. Tuesday, November 1st. So we urge you to get out and vote. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Thank you very much, and good night. I'm Mary Hunter-Utt, co-president of the League of Women Voters of the Cape Cod area, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's candidates forum. But before we get underway, Rosemary Shields will make an announcement.
Hi, I'm Rosemary Shields, co-chair of the Voter Service Committee of the League of Women Voters of the Cape Cod area. This is a hybrid evening, live here in the auditorium and online on Zoom, on a Zoom webinar. I have an announcement for our Spanish-speaking participants on Zoom. And I also want to thank Jeb Mays and Carmen Coqui Negron for interpreting. Bienvenido a nuestro foro de candidatos para fiscal de distrito de Cape Cod y las Islas. Para acceder al idioma español, haga clic en el globo en la parte baja de la pantalla y elija su idioma. En su celular, haga clic en los tres puntitos para encontrar el globo. Gracias, y gracias a Jeb Mays y Coqui Negron por todo su apoyo y ayuda.
Thank you, Rosemary. We welcome all of you here at Four Seas and via Zoom to tonight's candidates for Cape and Islands District Attorney. We want to thank our co-sponsors, the Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition, MAWOC, represented tonight by Deborah Dagwan, and the Cape Cod Times, represented tonight by Sarah Carlin. We also want to recognize the technical support in streaming the program to Channel 98 and Channel 99 by the Cape Media Center. And we particularly want to thank the Cape Cod Community College for hosting us live at the Tilden Arts Center. This forum is part of the League of Women Voters' ongoing voter education work to help voters make informed decisions for the November 8th election. We hope that over the course of this program, you will learn more about the candidates and what they hope to do if elected to represent the Cape and Islands District Attorney, as Cape and Islands District Attorney. I will now turn the forum over to our moderator, Dr. Kathleen Leslie of the League of Women Voters of the Plymouth area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I would like to introduce our candidates for Cape and Islands District Attorney. They are Democrat Rob Galabois and Republican Dan Higgins. We thank the both of you for showing commitment to our community by running for public office and by participating in this forum. I will start the program by explaining the procedures for the forum, which each candidate received ahead of time. You will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, 2 minutes for a closing statement, and 2 minutes to answer each question. Opening and closing statements were just determined by lot. Rob Galabois, you are first with the opening statement.
May I go now? Okay.
No, I'm being told no.
Okay.
I'm not done with my instructions, I'm sorry. The timekeepers are sitting in the first row. When there is a half-minute left on your speaking time, the timekeeper will hold up a card that says 30 seconds, a yellow card, indicating that you have 30 seconds left. Please wrap up by finishing your sentence when you see the stop card. If you continue speaking beyond a sentence after the stop card is held up, I will say thank you and move on to the next speaker. Personal references about other candidates are out of order. We are speaking to the issues. Not only is this meeting live in the main auditorium of the Tilden Arts Center on the campus of Cape Cod Community College, this forum is on Zoom and is being broadcast live by Cape Media on Channel 98 and Channel 99, and will be rebroadcast several times before the November 8th election. Instructions for the audience. Please turn off your cell phones and watches. We request that you treat all candidates fairly and remain quiet during the forum. No clapping, and certainly no booing until the very end when each candidate has given his closing statement. No campaign literature or signs are allowed inside the room. You are encouraged to submit questions for the candidates on the provided index cards. Questions must be addressed to both candidates and must apply to issues or qualifications for their particular office. Raise your hand if you would like an index card or need one picked up. A league panel will review the questions for legibility, clarity, and applicability to all candidates. I will read as many questions as time allows. Before we will begin, we will hear from Rosemary, who will give instructions to our Spanish speakers. Rosemary?
One more time. Bienvenido a nuestro foro de candidatos para fiscal de distrito de Cape Cod y las Islas. Para acceder al idioma español, haga clic en el globo en la parte baja de la pantalla y elija su idioma. En su celular, haga clic en 3 puntitos para encontrar el globo. Gracias. And a reminder to the candidates, please speak clearly and take lots of breaths. It will help the interpreters to translate your words and best reflect your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. We are now ready for opening statements. Rob Galaboys is first.
Thank you. Thank you, League of Women Voters and your partners for bringing us this debate, and for Dan Higgins for being here this evening. My name is Rob Galaboys, and I live in Barnstable with my wife, Nikki. I have a vision to build and lead a new DA's office based on accountability, transparency, and a combination of toughness and compassion. Nikki and I moved to the Cape in the mid-90s. Both of our boys were born here on Cape Cod. I began my legal career 27 years ago, and I've served on the Planning Board, Finance Committee, and School Committee. My 27 years of practice includes working both as a prosecutor and a defense attorney across the Cape and Islands, as well as the Commonwealth. I frequently handle the most serious of cases, including being the lead attorney of 15 homicides. We are seeking to serve the public in this role as DA. I am the only candidate that has worked both sides of criminal cases. That experience gives me a unique perspective and allows me to represent our communities in a deeper and more professional way. My experience in other jurisdictions motivates me to launch a mental health court session, where the professionals come right into the courtroom and deal with a struggling defendant. I will also seek to launch a veteran session where we seek volunteers from our veteran community to come in to work with a struggling veteran before the court. The opioid crisis remains at the forefront of all of our communities. I've taken the meetings at Duffy Center, Peer Recovery, Bayview Health, and Column Health. And the conversation always turns to the elephant in the room. No residential treatment programs in the mid to lower Cape area. That's an issue that I seek to address. My office will seek to detain from the outset and hold fully accountable those who traffic in dangerous narcotics like fentanyl and heroin. My office will never plea bargain with career offenders and armed career criminals. As DA, I will forever protect a woman's right to choose her own reproductive health care. As DA, I will cooperate with law enforcement officials in Texas who have launched a criminal investigation into the transporting of migrants to Martha's Vineyard. And finally, I believe in the sanctity of elections and will honor the vote of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Higgins, your opening statement.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending here. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for organizing this candidates forum, and thank you to Mr. Galabois for being here as well. My name is Dan Higgins. I've been an assistant district attorney for my entire legal career. For 13 years, I've devoted my legal career to the Cape and Islands. I have met with countless victims. I have tried cases in every court, including Superior Court, and every crime, including murder, on the prosecution side. I live in West Barnstable with my wife and my son. I am devoted to the Cape and Islands. I have devoted my career to it. I believe in treating people as individuals, not policy. Our calling is to do the right thing and treat people fairly. It's a very human thing that we do with human elements. We look at someone's record or lack of record. We look at the facts of a case. And also importantly, and not talked about enough, is we look at victim input. We have meetings behind closed doors with victims who are scared to testify, who are trembling, who survived a very potentially deadly situation. And we need to empower them to stand up, testify, and if the person is convicted, to speak for themselves at a sentencing hearing if they wish to do so. I have thrown my name into the ring to be your next district attorney, and I would be honored to do so. I ask for the vote of the voters of the Cape and Islands, and thank you very much.
Thank you. We now begin the question and answer portion of the forum. Candidates, during the course of the discussion, please feel free to have a question repeated. I will now turn over the first two questions to Sarah Carlin of the Cape Cod Times. Dan Higgins will be the first to answer. Ms. Carlin?
Thank you. The current district attorney apparently does not keep a Brady list. That is a list that is available to the public, which includes defense attorneys, of law enforcement officers who may be called to testify in court, but who have been found to be untruthful or whose credibility has been otherwise compromised. Do you plan to create such a list and to share it with the public? Why or why not?
Thank you for the question. Accountability for police officers and for the witnesses that we put on the stand every day in a prosecution is an important one. There needs to be public accountability. And the district attorney's office is called under the Brady and Giglio cases to make sure that any information as to untruthfulness previously by a witness is turned over to the defense. What we do as prosecutors is we send what we call a Brady letter to the involved police departments, and we put it right to the chief of that department to notify us of any officers who have had a finding of untruthfulness. We owe that to defendants to protect their rights, and we want to ensure the integrity of our prosecutions and our convictions because we owe that to the public and to the victims of violent crime. I will ensure that we comply with the law under Brady and Giglio, and I will ensure that we do not put officers on the stand who have violated that if we find that they should not go onto the stand.
Thank you, Dan Higgins. Rob Galabois, would you like the question repeated?
No, and I'm going to answer the question. To arrive at public safety, we need full accountability and transparency. And I agree with the procedure that was just outlined by Mr. Higgins in terms of getting in touch with the police departments, seeking information that would be relevant to putting together a Brady package, if you will. That is, if there's any sort of history of a police officer being untruthful. But to get to your question, Madam from the Cape Cod Times, you asked whether we would maintain a list of those particular prosecutors or police officers. And I believe you also inquired whether we would make those lists public.
Yes.
Okay. My office would be consistent with the other district attorney's offices across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We would maintain such a list, and we would make those lists public. And that's not something unique. That's already going on across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Thank you.
We have a second question from the Cape Cod Times that will be answered first by Rob Galaboys. They can't hear you in the back. If you would speak loudly, Sarah
Yeah.
Carlin.
Sure. Is this a little better? No? Is this a little better? Like that? Yeah, I think it is on. All right, let's see. The current DA has a record of not being forthcoming with members of the press who represent members of our community. While he did appoint an assistant district attorney to deal with the press a few years ago, after he was pressured to do so, it often takes days to get a response to requests for information, and the response often does not answer the questions we've asked. Interviews are mainly via email, which does not allow for follow-up questions. If elected, what is your plan for dealing with the press, who, again, are an extension of the community?
Rob Galaboys.
Okay. I would absolutely agree with that statement, that the press is an extension of the community. We will have the open door policy, so to speak, at my district attorney's office. We will be readily accessible to the press. I've spoken before how my administration will not exist through the issuance of press releases. You will get a live body. That is important to what I talked about earlier in regards to accountability and transparency. You will know what our position is, we will be able to convey it to you, and we will present ourselves ready to answer whatever questions you have. So we will return back to press conferences, so to speak, where our doors will be opened up and you can come into our office and we will answer your questions directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Higgins.
Thank you. I too believe in transparency. It is important that the district attorney's office assuages the concerns of the community after an especially violent act. Yes, we will put that information out there. My door will be open to everyone. The press, those who voted for me, those who didn't vote for me. It will be an open door to the interests of the community. What the district attorney's office has to do is balance the privacy aspect of an individual, and we have to keep the integrity of the juror pool for trial, ultimately the end of a significant prosecution. We have a duty not to taint the jury pool in the public forum. So we do need to provide information quickly to the public via the press, which is one of the best tools to do so, to assuage the concerns of the community, to let them know if a case is solved, to let them know if an arrest is made, and to let them know what has happened and what is going to happen coming up in the criminal case. However, we have to be careful not to try the case in public. There are emotions that run high on cases of violence, domestic violence, sexual assaults. We have to be very careful to respect the privacy of the victim, the interests and right of a trial of the defendant, and not to taint the jury pool. I will be responsive to media requests. I will ensure that we issue press releases. I will ensure that we answer the phone when the press calls, and that phone will be 24/7.
Thank you. The next two questions will be asked by Deborah Dagwan of the Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition.
Thank you. Good evening. As district attorney, what would you do to recruit prosecutors of color and increase the diversity of employees at all levels? Not sure who's answering first.
The first is answered by Dan Higgins.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I do believe that the DA's office should reflect the makeup of the community for people of color and everyone across both sexes as well. Our district attorney's office, I think, is well balanced in terms of men and women on the job, but there is work to do. The Cape Cod is evolving. Our population is increasing. We see a massive increase in the summertime of part-time residents as well as tourists, obviously. I do believe in recruiting the best and the brightest. I will reach out to the law schools in Boston and elsewhere. I will make sure that we are going to recruiting events, and I welcome the applications of all, including those from communities who may be underrepresented or underserved. One thing that the current DA's office does, and I would like to continue, is supporting the YMCA Young Achievers program. I think it would be wonderful to have someone come back from that program that we have supported after going off to college and then law school to return to serve their community. I think our office should reflect the community, and I would like to see more applicants.
Thank you. Rob Galaboys?
I went back in my memory, and I think this is accurate. I don't want to misrepresent, but I think this is accurate. I don't believe there's been an assistant district attorney of color in this DA's office since at least 1994. You can all do the math on that, see how long that's been. I don't need to go to law schools to find folks. The benefit of my practice going across the Commonwealth and working in virtually all counties across the Commonwealth is I've gotten to know DAs across the Commonwealth. And while it's an adversarial system, we actually get along once we're done with a case in the courtroom. There are a lot of great attorneys out there that want to come work for me. There are a lot of great attorneys out there that are minorities that want to come work for me. We have about 8 or 9 weeks between the election and swearing in January. That's a transition period. We will certainly have a transition team put together, and we will start taking those applications during that time. Once we're in office in January, we will form a committee, a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. And while there will be many roles for that particular committee, which I don't believe exists presently, we will include in one of those roles the ongoing recruitment of minority members across the Commonwealth and here on the Cape and the Islands as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Second question, Deborah Dagmon.
Thank you. As district attorney, what is your plan engaged with communities, particularly communities of color, to build trust that your office is committed to promoting equal justice under the law regarding charging, sentencing, dangerous hearing, and plea deals? How will you make that data transparent?
Well,
Rob Galaboys, you are first.
Thank you. First of all, you dropped a word there at the end of your question. I believe it was data, is what you just said. And right now, my understanding, data is not collected by the President's office in many different respects. Data collection is critical to try to identify how we are doing and what we are doing on a regular basis. When you collect data and how you're handling cases, you get to see, of course, and scrutinize yourself as to how you're trying to be consistent in handling people the same or equally. But equally important is to be able to share that data. This goes to the transparency and accountability, of course. We need to collect the data of what we're doing and then share it with the public, so not only are we scrutinizing ourselves and our performance, but we also open up to the public scrutiny, so we can try to improve our abilities to provide public safety without crossing over any particular thresholds. Thank you.
Dan Higgins, same question.
Thank you, and thank you for that question. I think that is an important question here. When I began my campaign, I reached out to a man named John Reed, and I had a conversation with him from the very beginning of this process.
Speak into the mic.
He has come to our office when there's been a concern from the community about a case in a particular instance, maybe a police response or how someone is being treated. And we have heard those concerns and worked with the community. I also believe in collecting data. I believe it should be done by the court system. And why I believe that is our prosecution is an adversarial process. Mr. Galaboys in a defense attorney role, myself in a prosecutor role. In that situation, the defendant would be represented by an attorney. I don't think it's right for a prosecutor to go up to that person who's represented and ask them how they identify or guess from their appearance or their booking photo. I believe that the court, however, is the best mechanism to collect neutral, reliable data. And I think then, if the court does it, we will have a uniform practice, not just in Barnstable County, but across the state. Then we will have data that comes from the individual, how they identify. It won't be during the heat of a booking process or in an argument, during a bail argument potentially in the courtroom. Instead, it'll be during an informational interview by a probation officer at the behest of the judge. And I think then we can start to collect uniform data across all of the counties. And then as a community, we need to look at it and interpret it and look at what's happening.
Thank you, Deborah Dagwan. We now move on to the questions and answers from the audience. When people registered for this forum, we asked them to send questions in advance. We will also ask the questions from the live audience. Please note I will alternate the order of who answers first. You have 2 minutes to answer the question, and I will start with Dan Higgins. Thank you. What is your position on upholding the Family and Work Mobility Act passed by the Mass Legislature this year? This act allows undocumented immigrants to obtain learner permits and to meet testing and insurance requirements in order to obtain a Massachusetts driver's license. Dan Higgins.
As we all know, driving within the Commonwealth is a privilege. It's not a right. And I think it's important that we make sure we know who we are giving a license to. In the case of undocumented immigrants, I think a license has the potential to lead to other things. I believe that there was a request by the Baker administration to make it a different license that would be flagged as not having proven citizenship. And I believe that was turned down. I think it is an important question, so important that the voters should decide on it, not just the legislature. I believe that we need to be careful about who we're providing licenses to in terms of identity. We do, as prosecutors, see people who are here illegally, and we do see them involved in the criminal justice system. It is important that we know who they are and where they're coming from, and whether or not they have a criminal history. Identification of these persons at arraignment is very difficult. I have seen instances where we have objected to the finalizing of a bail decision without the court knowing who the person is. Probation could not confirm the identity of the person. I have seen this happen, and it's not right. We're releasing someone back into the community, we don't know their name, and that goes to the heart of bail, whether the person will return to court or not. We need to know if they're connected to this community, to know if they'll return for trial so that the rights of victims are protected and the case can be seen through. I believe if we give licenses out without knowing where they're coming from, what the record is, and their true identity, that is a slippery slope.
Same question, Rob Galabois.
I'd like to use some of my time to get back to the previous question. I fully believe the district attorney's office itself is capable of maintaining data regarding racial identity and ethnic background and identity. It's not something just for the courts. When a defendant is arrested or a person is arrested, they self-identify during the booking process. And that information is shared not only with the courts, but also the district attorney's office. And perhaps, too, one of the advantages of me being a defense attorney, I'm aware that defendants are interviewed by the probation department before arraignment, and they there also self-identify as being from a particular racial or ethnic background. So it's not just something the courts can address. The DA's office gets that same paperwork as the court, and the DA's office is fully capable of maintaining that data as well. Now getting to the question about the Working Families and Mobility Act. I'm for it. I want to be right up front about that. My understanding under the process is an individual needs to provide 2 forms of identification. I have full trust in our law enforcement officials to examine the authenticity of the documents that are provided by someone to get that license to begin with. These folks are in our communities and they're working and supporting our particular communities. I believe there were 16 other states that passed a similar law before we did. And I would suggest, actually, I know this, there has not been any uptick in crime whatsoever with the issuance of these licenses to the undocumented workers. There has not been any instances of voter fraud or an uptick in voter fraud since these licenses were handed out. Where there has been an uptick? Auto insurance policies. And that keeps us all safer. Thank you.
This is a long question, and the first responder will be Rob Galabois.
Terrific.
A recent Harvard
Get a drink of
study
water.
summarized that people of color are overrepresented across all stages of the criminal justice system relative to their share of the population. How would you develop a system to identify and prevent racial bias within the criminal justice system? What is your plan for engaging in dialogue in a systematic way with the public, and especially with marginalized communities and their organizations?
I'm not necessarily familiar with the Harvard study that you're referencing right now, but I'm definitely familiar with a study that's been talked about the past several months in local media reports. It was a study by Mass Inc. Reflecting a 2015 study right here, Barnstable County. And in that study, it talked about how the African-American population here on the Cape makes up, I want to say it was 2.9%, or approximately 3% of the overall population. But yet, the pretrial detention of African Americans, the population at the local jail, comprised 25%. I remember remarking when I was first told this, or I first learned this, that this isn't just a racial disparity. This is a breakdown, a complete breakdown in the system. How do we try to rectify it? Again, this word's been used frequently here tonight, but it's appropriate. We need to keep data. We need to see how we are handling certain cases to ensure that we're employing fundamental fairness across the board. So I don't want to sound like that broken record, but data keeping is critical to ensure that we are treating everyone fairly. And then, of course, is to further those efforts is to share that data so we can, of course, again, open ourselves up to scrutiny from all entities that have an interest. Thank you.
Dan Higgins?
Again, I believe the court system is the neutral arbiter who should be keeping data. And data is important. That's step one, is having reliable data. Not data from a booking where an officer has to guess how someone identifies when they're remaining silent, they're right at booking. Not from a prosecutor guessing how someone identifies that won't talk to us and who's represented by an attorney at arraignment, but by the neutral arbiter, the court system. We want a uniform process across Massachusetts. We don't want piecemeal across this state. And I think what Mr. Galabois is talking about in the Northwestern DA's office, that DA's office, as one example, provides a data set that comes out. Now, I can tell you that one thing we need, the Massachusetts District Attorneys Association needs to get funding for an updated data management system for all DA's offices. It's important that it's uniform, no matter the political party affiliation of the elected DA. We need uniformity across the Commonwealth. The second part of data is interpreting it, and that is a conversation we need to involve our elected leaders in and the community, because there are other disparities out there that might be playing into that disparity we're discussing right now, such as financial, educational disparities. We need to get at root causes to solve a problem. Step one, reliable data. Step two, a community conversation. It's not just the criminal justice system, because the criminal justice system is reactionary. Someone's been placed under arrest, a 911 call was made, officers investigate, probable cause was determined, and the person was placed under arrest. We don't go seeking people. We don't go targeting people to bring into the court system. They come in under arrest after someone has called police for help. And if the court determines probable cause exists, a complaint issues. The prosecutor's role then is to be blind to how a person identifies. They are required to make their decisions on the facts and the background of the person. If they made it based on how someone identifies, that would be wrong. They wouldn't be a prosecutor anymore.
Thank you. Dan Higgins responds first to the next question. How would you take into account such factors as trauma, substance abuse, and mental illness in prosecutorial discretion?
Thank you for that question. These are important topics right now. As we all know, district court can be the front line of people who are involved in the criminal justice system and come to it because of an issue that may stem from mental health that's untreated. It may stem from substance abuse disorder because they're addicted to an opiate. It's important we take these things into account. We do every day. With mental health, we have a screening process. The police chiefs have been given this form over the years. Some police departments use it more than others. Some are more proactive than others. They write down on this sheet for the prosecutor what the family tells them at the scene. If the person is diagnosed, for example, bipolar, if the person recently fell off of their meds, etc. That information is given to a prosecutor. And what we do at arraignment is we decide, should we request the judge summons the court clinician to do an evaluation for competency to stand trial? And then we learn a lot at that moment. Some people with mental health are never arraigned. Others, their cases are dismissed when appropriate, and they're given a path into treatment. But sometimes there is a victim crime which must be prosecuted, and the person is competent and is criminally responsible. Likewise, with substance abuse disorder, if a small drug possession comes into our office, I have routinely at the pretrial level or at the arraignment level spoken with the person or their attorney and offered, if they go into an intensive outpatient treatment for 90 days or inpatient, that we will in return, if they do what they need to do for themselves, dismiss the case. And why is because not only are we helping the person, we're helping the community to prevent recidivism. At that moment, the interest of all of us, the community, dovetails nicely with the interest of the individual. And sometimes it takes the court system encouraging someone into treatment by way of the criminal process. We take all of these things into consideration every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob Gallibois, same question.
Again, I would offer one of the great advantages of me working on this side of the aisle, or the courtroom, if you will, and working over the bridges and not simply on the Cape and the islands. I have seen mental health specialty sessions up and running in counties literally all across the Commonwealth. And I haven't heard anyone in this present office demanding a mental health session in our particular county or on the islands either. I've been talking about this since January, that when elected, I will work with the trial court to get a mental health session up and running in here in the district court. And I've been joined in those particular efforts by one of my endorsers, Maura Healy, who has said specifically in endorsing me that she would support those particular efforts. So I'm looking very much forward to the opportunity to bring a mental health session to the Cape and the islands. What goes on there? Exactly what you think might go on there. The professionals in the field come right into the courtroom and work directly with the defendant. They work with the judges, the probation officers, the prosecutors, and the defense attorneys. And they work to get to that core issue, what is causing this person to struggle? And then they try to treat that core issue. And of course, by doing so, as Mr. Higgins just indicated, we reduce recidivism. And when we reduce recidivism, we of course make all of us safer. In a similar vein, just like in the recovery court, when someone is struggling with substance use disorder, you offer as much treatment as you possibly can, because again, getting to that particular core issue, by treating that core issue, you reduce recidivism, the likelihood that they're going to come back before the court, and our communities are safer. Thank you.
Next question to be answered first by Rob Gallibois. What does the term public safety mean to you, and how would it apply to your role as district attorney?
Public safety is, without question, the #1 priority of any district attorney. Every single person sitting in this room right now, and a couple of you walking around up in the balcony area, we all demand, not simply ask, but we demand our local police officers to patrol our roads to keep us safe. And it's absolutely crucial that a district attorney's office create, and this is just as important, maintain the closest of bonds with the law enforcement partners. Of course, one of the top priorities is keeping us physically safe, but we also have to, employ these services that are available in these mental health sessions a veterans court session that I touched upon briefly in my opening. And just to further expand, that's when we seek to bring in veterans in the neighboring communities to work with a struggling veteran before the court, and again, get to that core issue and reduce recidivism. By using traditional models of law enforcement, the tough on crime, when appropriate, our officers will certainly do that. But also, too, you've got to employ treatment options to keep our cases safe, our communities safe, and therefore promote public safety for everybody.
Dan Higgins, same question.
Thank you. Public safety is the goal of the District Attorney's Office. We do that by prosecuting violent offenders. I want to keep Cape Cod safe, and how we do that is by putting violent people behind bars to separate them from the community. Those are the individuals who are doing truly evil acts out there, and it's essential that someone in this campaign talk about that. There's another host of individuals who make mistakes out of human frailty, mental health, from drug addiction, from simple youthful indiscretion. And we have programs for that. We have diversion. We have probation for that. We work with those people who will work with us. But public safety means that the district attorney is up in the middle of the night responding to homicides, and that the district attorney is ensuring that those that would harm us out in the community, in our homes, on the streets, or in our places of work, those people need to be locked up who will not listen. It is also important that the audience knows, as we talk here about rates of incarceration, the makeup of those incarcerated, we do live in a great state. You should know that Massachusetts is one of the lowest states of incarceration and has been for some years. We rank at the bottom, 49 or 50 out of 50. It's important that everyone knows that. We do not have everyone locked up in this state. It is meant for individuals for crimes of violence and those who are trafficking fentanyl on our streets. I will make sure that we prosecute those cases fully. I will make sure that those people are locked up. But we do need to know that we do not have an over-incarceration problem in this state. Our jails have plenty of room, and I believe in treating people fairly.
Next question to be answered first by Dan Higgins. Would you provide information to non-citizen defendants regarding the plea bargaining process?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah,
Yes.
me too.
It's a little tricky.
Would you provide information to a non-citizen defendant regarding the plea bargaining process?
Yes. We don't ask people their citizenship when we are meeting with them if they're pro se. We talk about the facts of the case. We talk about their rights. And we make sure they know they have the right to an attorney. If they can't afford one, they can apply and the court will appoint one for them free or at a reduced fee. We have CPCS, those are career public defenders, and we have the defenders list. Those are private attorneys who take publicly appointed cases for those who are indigent in the court system. We do not ask them their citizenship status. We give them the rights and how the court system works, just as we would tell a citizen. It's very similar in how it would never be appropriate for a prosecutor to ask someone how they racially identify during one of those conversations. We don't pick and choose between citizens and non-citizens. We make sure that the rights are given to everyone who comes before us. That's the job of the court. That's the job of the district attorneys.
Thank you. Rob Galaboy, same question.
If I could just ask for clarification on the question. Did the question reflect non-citizens representing themselves or non-citizens who had an attorneys, or is it ambiguous?
It isn't specified, but I assume it's someone with a lawyer.
Okay. I would suggest that we wouldn't necessarily know as prosecutors if someone is not a citizen. We would certainly have information available to us right in the reports that are routine, if you will, the police reports. It would almost always identify where someone was born, and there may be some other information contained within the police report that may lead us to believe or have at least a feeling of whether or not this person is a citizen. I would suggest then it is incumbent upon, because of the tremendous authority that's wielded by the district attorney's office to take a hard look of what the charges are this particular person is facing. If they don't have an attorney, and it's a serious case, and the ultimate resolution that you might be seeking rightfully could cause problems for them regarding residency or staying in the United States, I think it's incumbent upon us as professional responsibilities to encourage them to get an attorney. If it's someone who is unrepresented, and again, we see that there's potential upon a particular resolution that would cause them deportation concerns, I think we need to tread very carefully. We, of course, have a responsibility, again, going back to public safety and protecting our local communities, but then again, we also need to safeguard ourselves, safeguard the whole process, if you will, by not trying to take advantage of someone that doesn't have an attorney. So it's a delicate balancing act. I wish I had the magical answer for it, but I don't. All I can say is that we would need to train our prosecutors to be able to identify this potential issue and proceed accordingly.
One more question? Okay. And I apologize to the audience. We simply are running out of time. We are not going to get to all of your questions. This next question will be answered first by Rob Galaboys. What role does the DA play in determining bail? Who sets the amounts? What principles would you follow to protect both the public and the defendant?
Well, the district attorney is the one that can make a request of bail. Ultimately, it's up to the judge to decide whether or not to set a bail. A bail is certainly appropriate in conditions or circumstances where a particular individual has a history of not appearing back before the court. Under our rules in Massachusetts, there is a presumption of what's called personal recognizance, that the person is going to show up. That is, that there doesn't have to be a placement of bail on the person. That's the presumption. But if there is some evidence out there suggesting that someone is not going to show up, then it's appropriate to evaluate whether or not a bail should be placed. My practice takes me beyond the state courts. I also do a lot of federal court work. And what I've seen tends to work in conforming behavior during the pendency of a case is employing conditions on an individual. The federal court system doesn't have a cash bail system. If you commit a serious offense in federal court, you're simply detained. And we have those options available to us here on the state side as well. Other than that, they place conditions on someone to ensure that they're going to conform their behavior to be able to return back to their local communities, and the communities will be safe during the pendency of those cases. I've talked about on this campaign how wealth should not be a determining factor to bail. I am a big proponent of putting conditions on people because over the course of 27 years, I've seen it work. A lot of defendants don't like having obligations to check in with the probation department or be on a GPS monitoring device. But those conditions ultimately work. And if they can show that they can abide by those conditions during the pendency of the case, then they establish a little bit of a track record to show whether or not they'll be successful during a probationary period. So there are certainly circumstances when a bail is appropriate. There's definitely circumstances when being held without bail is appropriate. But I'm also a big believer of imposing conditions on defendants when appropriate.
Thank you. Dan Higgins?
Thank you. Bail is determined based upon the facts of the case, the defendant's history or lack of history, including defaulting and not coming to court, and their ties to the community on the Cape and Islands, their ties to this state. We deal with transient population on Cape Cod, including summer tourists, including summer workers, some people from other countries, some people from other states. When a crime is committed, it's essential that we look at the potential penalty they're facing. For instance, a disorderly conduct charge is much different than a murder charge. When someone's facing a murder charge, they're facing potentially life in prison. The presumption of innocence the presumption of personal recognizance doesn't apply there. But in other crimes, it does. It takes discretion and a trained prosecutor to make the evaluation as to whether bail should be requested. There is case law already that prosecutors and judges must abide by. Commonwealth versus Brangden. The parties must take into account the means of the defendant, meaning, are they a millionaire or are they homeless with no money to their name? That happens every day in court. Discretion is used, and it's important that we stand up for victims. Sometimes bail needs to be requested. It is certainly not every case. I would suggest it's few and far between on a given day, let's say a Monday of arraignments. It's only a couple cases where it's needed. There's also a dangerousness statute, which is also a tool we only use at appropriate times when someone poses a danger to a specific individual that they're after or the community at large. And we make sure we file that document when necessary to protect the community. My position on bail has not changed. My opponent's has. At the beginning of this, he announced on his website that he would instruct prosecutors, he would have a policy that bail would not be requested, cash bail on all misdemeanors. Without announcement, he subsequently changed his website to say non-violent misdemeanors. That's after I spoke with police unions and voters on this issue that gave me concern.
We will move on now to closing statements. You will each have 2 minutes. And by lot, Mr. Galabois goes first.
Thank you again for the opportunity to address your questions. The district attorney is an impact player in the criminal justice system. The DA represents the conscience of the community. As I mentioned in my opening, I will bring a mental health session and a veteran session to our district court. To fight against the business of drug traffickers, I will employ prosecutor tactics utilized by DA's offices over the bridges that are not utilized by this DA's office. I am speaking specifically of seeking to detain at arraignment all drug traffickers in fentanyl and heroin as a danger to our community. To tackle the problem of repeat major felony offenders, I will direct my prosecutors to use a statute that requires a judge to impose consecutive sentences and therefore prevent any sort of package deals. I will assemble a team of seasoned prosecutors to focus on those who prey on the most vulnerable among us, our children and our seniors. We will hire an experienced grant writer to obtain the necessary funds to enhance our public safety mission. We will employ a community engagement officer who will be in our communities every single day to keep the finger on the pulse of our neighborhoods and report directly back to me. We will create a community coalition. There'll be a chapter in every town. The coalitions will be comprised of local elected officials, law enforcement officials, regular citizens, and there'll be monthly meetings with our office. The district attorney serves a vital role in our community. I have 27 years' experience handling the most serious of cases from both sides of the courtroom. I have run my own business, and I've learned the value of creating a budget and operating inside of that budget. I've given back to the community by serving on boards and committees. I have presented new visions to arrive at public safety by employing tough-on-crime laws to combat both drug traffickers and career offenders. On November 8th, after nearly a half a century of essentially the same administration, we have a chance to change the course of the district attorney's office by selecting the candidate who brings the intrinsic value of having worked both sides of the courtroom and enjoys the diverse experiences learned from engaging with other DA's offices and court staff to lead this DA's office. My name is Rob Galabois, and I'm asking for your vote to lead the Cape and Islands DA's office. Thank you.
Closing statement, Timothy Higgins.
That's my middle name, but Daniel Timothy Higgins,
I'm
thank
sorry.
you. That's okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for sitting
Dan
here for an
Higgins.
hour. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about this election. It is important. It keeps the district attorney close to the people. Our job is to keep the Cape and Islands a safe place to live for all of our families. I love this job. That's why I applied 13 years ago, straight out of law school. That's why I've stayed in this job and stayed on the Cape and Islands, devoting my legal degree to serving the community. I didn't do it for money. I started at $37,000, and luckily our starting pay has increased with the assistance of MDAA and the legislature and the governor. but I want to keep experienced professional leadership leading this office. The Cape and Islands, whether they know it or not, have very experienced prosecutors and victim witness advocates working every day in this office. They are underpaid. They do work second jobs at night. They do have families here. They are your neighbors. We work closely with the police departments. I'm honored to be the only candidate endorsed by law enforcement unions across the Cape, by the outgoing district attorney, the outgoing sheriff, and statewide law enforcement organizations as well. I would be honored to be your next district attorney. I feel that my 13 years as a prosecutor, prosecuting every type of crime, including murder, on the Cape and Islands, supervising 10 district attorneys as a team, and supervising 5 district courts across the Cape and Islands, has led me to this moment and qualifies me to run the office and hit the ground running on day one. I love this community. I love my job. That's why I put my name forward in this election. I would be honored to be your next district attorney. I ask for your vote, and I thank you very much for your time.
I am now turning over the microphone to Mary Utt, co-president of the League of Women Voters of the Cape Cod area. Mary?
Thank you. I'd like to close this forum by thanking our candidates, Rob Gallibois and Dan Higgins, for deciding to run for district attorney and giving voters a choice. I would also like to thank Dr. Kathleen Leslie for serving as moderator this evening. We want to remind voters that the deadline to register to vote is October 29th. Early voting is October 22nd to November 4th, but you should check with your town hall or your town's website for locations and schedules. And while you're at it, check out a sample ballot. Election day is November 8th. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Applications for mail-in voting must be received by the town clerk's office by 5 p.m. Tuesday, November 1st. So we urge you to get out and vote. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Thank you and good night. Okay.